Recently on social media, I've had an overwhelming amount of reels and other stuff where different Christians and pastors and other stuff are quoting Jeremiah 29:7. And here's what it says: "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find its welfare." And then this passage is used, and I see it regularly, to why we should be involved in politics. I got to stop for a moment and say this is really terrible biblical work, and you should catch it. You should know that you're being swindled by something when people are trying to use this to make a statement about what's going on in our world today without ever even discussing what's going on in this passage. So let's talk about this. So Jeremiah is writing to a group of people that are in exile in Babylon. Their false prophets are telling them that God's going to deliver them from Babylon soon. Jeremiah says that's not true, and a letter is written to these exiles. The letter basically is saying to them, you're going to be in exile for 70 years. You sort of need to get comfortable with that proposition. You're not going to get delivered out of here. God's not going to act in some miraculous way and send you back to Jerusalem. You're going to be here for 70 years. Get comfortable. Get used to it. And so while you're in there for 70 years, you have some options. You can create tension. You can create problems. You can rail against the way they do things, or you can just settle in and seek the welfare of the city. He is not telling them to get involved in Babylonian politics. He's surely not telling them to take over the Babylonian government and make it a Jewish one. It's simply saying, hey guys, you're going to be here for 70 years. You would be best to not be the people that are constantly raising a stink. You would be best to be people that just sort of get used to being here and live this thing out. Buy a house, start a family, do those things because you're going to be here for 70 years. That is specifically to these people in the Babylonian exile. You can't anachronistically read our political world into this text and then say from this text what we should do is we should be involved in government, we should be getting and doing this. It has nothing to do with that. It's so foreign to this text, and we really, honestly, we should be better than this. We can't allow just our own culture and our own views to dictate how we read Scripture. You know that. We all know that as Christians. We're supposed to be under Scripture. We're supposed to let Scripture speak to us. To do that, you have to know the context. You have to know who it was written to. You have to know why it was written to them. Then and only then can you make applicational principles. One of the applicational principles that you cannot make from this text is that somehow we're supposed to go out and then get involved in politics because we're going to seek the welfare of the city. Nothing in this text says about taking over government. Nothing in this text says anything about voting. Nothing in this text says anything about any of that stuff. And so to try to make that text do that just means you have an a priori position that you're wanting to impose on the text. And that is not what we do as Christians, any more than when he says that he's got prosperity for them and he's going to give them, I know the plans for you, declares the Lord in verse 11, and I've got a future for you that's great. That's not a promise that's for you and me. That's a promise for the people that are in exile. And you can't take that promise and say that's a guarantee for every Christian at all times. It's a promise that was made to the exiles in Babylon, and it was true for them. Now, what we can do from that is we can say, well, what that means is when God says something, he'll do it. Check. It means that when God says he'll deliver you, he'll do it. Check. Which says that when God says that he's going to act in a certain way, he'll 100%. But what we can't do is take these texts and rip them out and make them fit our current world. So when you hear somebody on a reel, on social media, that says, hey, Jeremiah 29:7 is the reason why we should be involved in politics, you just need to go, stop. That's not what that text is talking about at all in any way, shape, or form. Now, that being said, do I think that Christians have a right to vote? Of course I do. Do I think that Christians have, times and places where we can say things about the stuff that's going on in the current events of our world? Of course I do. But that doesn't mean you should be using this text to support something that it doesn't support. We need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, and we need to be reminded that Scripture has to be read in context, in its historical setting, in the way it was written to the original people before we can even begin to start making sense out of it. Don't read the Bible anachronistically. Don't read it cramming our time and our stuff into the text. It's not the way to read it. Let the text speak, and then let's make applications in our lives, and we will be better for it.